Good morning from Vienna. Yeah, we live in very volatile and fast-changing times, which means that not only we are meeting again here to talk about the parliamentary elections in Kosovo, but also that we have a slight change of program. My name is Sebastian Schäffer. I am the managing director of the Institute for the Danube region and Central Europe. We are doing this format together with our partners from the Karl-Renner-Institute and the Political Academy for quite some time now. And we are covering the elections in our target area together, providing insights and discussing the events, and then also sending out a briefing that we will also hear in a minute from Donika. But before we jump into this, I would like to give the floor to Felix Ofner, who is replacing Bettina Rausch today, who wanted to attend, but unfortunately had to cancel last minute due to other obligations. But nevertheless, Felix is also one of the long-standing partners of this endeavor, and we are very happy that you are here with us. Felix is the International Secretary of the Political Academy in Vienna. Felix, thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. Good morning. Our president is very sorry that she can't attend today's meeting, and she sends her best regards to all of you. And I'm sure maybe if it's possible, she will attend later to at least watch our discussion here, because she's very interested in the region. Whenever we face elections in the Danube region or Central Europe, we meet up to get some insights in this format. And first of all, I want to say thank you very much to the EDM for taking leadership in this project, in this cooperation. Thank you, Sebastian, and especially Daniel as well, who are the leaders, or who take the lead from side of the EDM in organizing this great series of events. Together with our fellow colleagues from Karl-Renner-Institute, we are pleased to partnering in this cooperation. And I think this cooperation is very beneficial for all of us and gives very good insights in the elections which are taking place all over Europe. As the Political Academy of the Austrian People's Party, we are always inviting people to discuss politics or political topics fundamentally, both on Austrian level as well as on international level. The Western Balkan is our main focus topic here. And we are convinced that Europe is not completed without the Western Balkans. This is basically consensus in Austria. Government, parliament, and many organizations are working on that. Of course, Austria has strong ties with the region, historically, politically, as well as economically. Since the early 90s of the last century, when former Yugoslavia collapsed, Austria focuses very much on the region. Alois Mock, our former foreign minister, was one of the strongest mentors in Europe for the Western Balkans, and was very involved in getting the recognition done for Slovenia and Croatia 30 years ago. Erhard Busek, the now president of the EDM, and a lot of other Austrian politicians are also very much involved in the transformation and getting the transformation of the countries done, which is not completed yet, though. We as the Political Academy try to contribute now to build a better understanding of the region in Austria and give people insights here. Before the Corona pandemic hit the world, we started study trips to all 6 countries of the Western Balkans and invited politicians as well as interested public to get impressions on site and to get in touch with the people of the countries. Kosovo is still to come. We already planned the trip to Kosovo, but due to the pandemic, we had to cancel it. The pandemic took away the options to be on site, but it got us another option, that is maybe even more beneficial, but it's a very nice replacement. We have the possibility to go live and go online with people from Kosovo, or with people from the Western Balkans overall. And we are trying very much to get this possibility as often as possible for people in Austria. And as an academy, we are, besides these events, which are very appreciated from our side, we have a lot of series of other events. Especially in March, we will have live connections to experts in capital cities. We will have lectures on the history of Yugoslavia. We will have lectures on the Western Balkans overall. And we even have e-learning. We have developed e-learnings on the Western Balkans. Yeah, today is about the upcoming parliamentary elections in Kosovo, the snap election that has become necessary after judgment of the Constitutional Court. And I'm sure we will learn more about the background this morning. I'm very happy and excited to hear more about that from you too. As we know, Kosovo was or just declared itself independent in 2008. And again, Austria was one of the first countries to recognize Kosovo. Our ties with Kosovo are very strong. We provide the third largest troop contingent to the peacekeeping mission. We, or more precisely, the Austrian companies are the largest investor financially in Kosovo, and we are very committed to support and promote the dialogue between Serbia and Kosovo. This morning, we hope to get some more insights into the initial cause of this election, about the outcome of the election, or the outcome we have to expect, and about the possible effects on politics in Kosovo. I'm looking forward, and I'm very happy to see and hear insights to this election. And yeah, thank you very much. And I hand over the floor again to Sebastian. Thank you.
Felix, thank you very much for giving us the perfect start to our discussion. I'm going to put you into the viewer audience, and then we are going to start right away. But I have to announce a quick change again. Mimika Dobroshi, who really wanted to join us, has to attend another meeting at the moment, but she promised to hop in once this is done. So we will see if she can join us before this is over. Very briefly to the structure, as I already mentioned, we'll hear a briefing by Donika Emini, who is Executive Director of the Civikos platform, an initiative of civil society organizations, 240 today, in Kosovo, and is established to create and promote an enabling environment for cooperation of formal civil society sector and state institutions in Kosovo. Donika, thank you very much for not only preparing the briefing, but also joining us in the morning. And our second panelist is Eraldin Fazliu. He is the editor-in-chief at Prishtina Insight for the Balkan Investigative Reporting Network, BIRN. And we are very glad that you are also here with us. Thank you for joining us. As for the structure, as I said, a quick briefing by Donika about the current situation. Then I'm going to start a discussion with my two panelists, and then we will open the floor to questions from the audience. When you're on Facebook, you can comment your questions. I will receive them here as well from my colleagues. When you're in the webinar, I already saw that you started to ask questions, but there is also the possibility, of course, to also join us for a question if you want to. If you want to speak with us, I will give you the opportunity. But now, without further ado, Donika, give us a brief overview. What is currently the state of play regarding the upcoming parliamentary elections?
Oh, that cannot be done in 10 minutes. Good morning to all of you who joined, and of course, thanks Sebastian for having us, Felix, Gerard and Daniel for helping me with the brief. I'm sorry if you hear background noise. This is the, our today's normal. Our neighbors are reconstructing the building, so we are becoming part of it. It's always under construction, huh? So yes, elections. I mean, if you hear about elections in the Balkans, it's nothing new. I mean, at some point, even the international media stopped covering elections, but now they're becoming more of a news because of this, kind of changes that the elections are bringing, at least on paper, because the real changes are, hard to be seen immediately because of this high level of state capture in all Western Balkan countries. But what happened in North Macedonia, and then the elections in 2019 in Kosovo, but then also Montenegro sort of started sending signals that elections are changing things in the Balkans, and then citizens can cast vote differently and without being pressured internally and externally, and this is a good news. These elections in Kosovo are important because I keep saying they are important, but they're actually important because they are taking place in the middle of multi-frontal crisis in Kosovo. And here we are talking about the institutional, political, constitutional, and socioeconomic crisis. And that's not just because of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's also because of deeply polarized political landscape that we have here in Kosovo since it started a long time ago in 2014, since we have this internal political instability. But I think it hit the peak with the overthrow of the Kurdi government 50 days after it, being in power, and a government that, at least it has been considered as a reformist, although we still did not see that because, 50 days, it can only help you navigate around the buildings and the offices, let alone to start real reforms. So after the elections in 2019, a lot has happened, which that will definitely be covered by Eraldin. We have been cooperating so much in the past two years, especially writing a lot about for Prishtina Insight, as a very good platform to actually vent whenever we need it. So these elections are important also because they are taking place in the middle of a pandemic, and Kosovo has not been successful in managing. And this is not just the case in Kosovo, this is a trend in Western Balkans, but also in Western Europe. Even the most developed countries have been challenged by the pandemic, let alone a system which is underdeveloped in many spheres, especially in healthcare system. These elections are also important because they are considered as bringing hope, that the last sort of chance for us to set the things straight. And this is not because a particular party is being seen as a winner. It's just that people really hope that these elections are going to be bringing stability, because what we need is political stability. Without that, we cannot concentrate on substance. I cannot recall the last time we actually talk about real things, not even the pandemic. We overshadowed even a global issue with our political problems internally. So if we have political stability, which we sort of are seeking for, we might be able to focus on substance. We might be able to actually deliver on the reforms and continue our path towards democracy, which has been, of course, stuck in status quo or even backsliding. Who runs and who gets to win? I mean, the usual suspects. I mean, Kosovo is a plural system. 28 subjects, political parties have been registered and certified. But of course, the big fish are the ones who actually take attention, and that's of course the Vendosia, the winner of the previous elections, and the LDK, PDK, and AK being considered as an old ruling elite, because at some point they in a way govern together, and they are considered the stakeholders in state capture and in success, but also in shortcomings and failures that Kosovo has gone through in the past 20 years. There have been a lot of discussions in Kosovo in relation to the decision of the Constitutional Court, which then was followed up by the Central Election Commission, not allowing Kurti, but also others, because Kurti took all the attentions, are 40 other people, 46, who were not certified because they have ongoing convictions, active convictions. And in the Kurti case, it was because of the tear gas in the parliament as a result of the demarcation and association agreement that they, as the opposition, once rejected. There are a lot of, I mean, if you look at the list of voters, 1.7 million voters are out there waiting to cast their vote on this Sunday. And I think what is very interesting this time is the diaspora vote. It has been triggering a lot of debates, and we should talk about this. I mean, especially because a lot of those are also in Austria. 130,000 people have been registered to vote from abroad. Only 60,000 of them have been certified and verified by the Central Election Commission. There were a lot of complaints in relation to this because first it has been considered as an obstacle that the Central Election Commission is creating intentionally to prevent or not to allow people from diaspora to vote. And that's, I mean, one of the theories is that diaspora widely is supporting Vedvendosje and vocally. So he has been also very active in lobbying in this regard. Who is the potential winner? I mean, the trend shows Vedvendosje, but also the polls. Nothing is official yet. That's why I also stated in the brief that it's not official. The sources are not verified because there are different methodologies that different companies use. But all of them are listing Vedvendosje plus 4 or 5% or minus 4 or 5% as the winner of the elections. It is going to be super complex situation after the elections because the Kosovo political system does not allow to have a big majority. The winner does not take it all. Usually coalitions are needed. And at this time we need a big coalition because we are not talking about the prime minister only, we are talking also about the president of Kosovo. When I mentioned the complexity of political situation in Kosovo, now we are kind of running on acting heads of states, acting prime minister, acting president, and no head of parliament. So all of this has to be solved immediately after the elections. And in this deeply polarized political landscape, forming coalitions, it will be a very difficult task. And it is a matter of urgency that we have a government as soon as possible. So elections are also taking place in the middle of the pandemic, and this is also a test for us. The political campaign has been not going well. I mean, I just mentioned that people are gathering in massive numbers, and this can, after 2 weeks, we can see the results of it, and we don't want to see that. The hospitals are overburdened, and I don't think that they will have the capacities to deal with another wave of infections. And it is hypocritical to see that the political parties are promising to manage the pandemic while they are exposing citizens and risking their health during the political campaign. We will definitely talk about the dialogue and EU integration, so I'm not talking about that as part of the brief. The brief will be out soon. It's very short and it really offers, you know, these elements. So this is a superficial sort of first-hand inputs in relation to the elections. And then I look forward to actually having an interactive discussion with Eraldin and also you and the audience on specific issues. Thanks a lot. This would be my initial intervention.
Donika, thank you very much for bringing us up to speed. My question now to Eraldin would be, can you walk us through the timeline since the last election? Why are we here again? What happened?
Well, as Donika said, it's very difficult to wrap up stuff that have happened, especially in the since 2019, when Vedvendosje, together with the LDK, Democratic League of Kosovo, formed a coalition aftermath the election, although that lasted around 6 months because the parties could not agree on the fate of the new president of Kosovo. And as we know, they finally managed to create a government which lasted only 52 days. Kurti was on the wheel of the government, that's true, but at the same time, it was soon understood that his position was undermined by the junior coalition partner, who basically I wouldn't like to call blackmail, but that's what exactly happened with the agreement in DC, and the fact that Kurti was introduced by LDK that is not ready to sign a deal with Serbia, and as such was designed as a person who cannot and who is denying the role of the US in Kosovo. The government fell after only 50 days, and then we had the new government that was formed only with 61 votes, and on the wheel of it was the former deputy prime minister who became Prime Minister Abdullah Hoti. So the deputy prime minister of Kurti became the new prime minister of Kosovo. And in 2 months, then we've seen that one of the votes, which was the minimum because the majority of the votes in Kosovo Assembly, 61 votes out of 120 seats, was a person who, Etem Arifi, who was convicted for a corruption affair. And thus on December 22nd, the government was ruled illegitimate, and therefore new elections were triggered. Now, this is in very short, like just the key moments, because I think there's a multifaceted crisis that Kosovo faced during this time. It's not only the long-standing ills that we had, the socio-economic, first of all, but as well as the political one. But that seemed to not have been sufficient, because then we also faced the pandemic, which was quite hit the whole world, but especially countries that are quite fragile in terms of healthcare systems and social policies, such as Kosovo, will feel it even more than, for instance, Austria or Germany, or countries that are more developed and who can cope. And we have actually seen that during the pandemic, even quite developed countries faced a lot of difficulties in coping with the pandemic. Now we are in another phase. We are basically, as Donika mentioned a bit, nothing is definitive, but the polls are suggesting that Vetvendosia will have quite a victory, which is not as it happened in 2019, which was only with the margins of 1% more than the LDK. Now, there are different polls that suggest that nearly Vetvendosia can reach 50% of the vote, which I think we can discuss here a bit, because conceptually, if you see, Kosovo was designed after the aftermath of the war, was designed as a country, first of all, under the UN administration, not as a country, but was designed in a way to have a politics of consensus. So no party will prevail, no party will dominate, no party will catch all or will control all the constitutions. The constitution that was also transitioned to in 2008 when Kosovo announced independence. And in this the 13 years, basically the politics of consensus was lacking so much. So polarizations have only helped to this situation where it is possible, we still need to see on Sunday, but it is possible that a party can win nearly 50%, which would mark almost an end to a political system in the way that, or political part, or that system where the politics of consensus was so much needed. So we will have to wait and see that. But I must say that these are not only the internal issues. In the last 6 years, we lacked any sense of not only consensus, but agreements on especially on foreign issues or related to relations with Serbia. This was an issue that brought down two governments. As I mentioned, the Kurti government was brought down because of the agreement or disagreement on on how to go forward with the dialogue in Serbia. At the same time, we remember that in 2019, former Prime Minister Ramush Haradinaj resigned. He justified because of a possible summoning from the special court, but we soon understood that he was so much pressured about the tax that was introduced towards Serbian goods, and also the junior coalitions were not in line with his policies. So in the last 5 years, Serbia was an issue. To come to a more explicit point, was an issue that brought governments down, the disagreements on how to go forward, and especially in 2020, the role of United States under US under Trump administration was also very disputable. We have seen quite some pressure coming from the US, and a direct, basically, pressure which brought to the downfall of the government. But what we've seen in these 6 years is a lack of any sort of stability, which has prevented any sort of talking about policies, about economic development, about any sort of reforms that Kosovo government need to undertake. So now everyone, and I don't want to ridicule, but everyone is blaming at each other, because no one has actually governed in the last 6 years. Like, everyone almost governed, like in this country, and no one. And this is a problem of our political system now, because in this last 6 years, everyone is blaming for misgovernance and for corruption and for any other stuff, because no one governed more than 2 years. So we've had really short-lived governments, which brought no reforms. Nothing was almost pushed ahead, if we exclude here the deal which was signed in DC, which is again was disputed by the ones who are set to win the elections, and it remains to be seen how they will proceed forward with some of the documents that were signed. Sometimes it's very difficult to call also that an agreement, because it's not typically an agreement in international relations what was signed in DC on the September 4th. Also, how will now, if Kurti wins now, the key question is how we will go forward with the dialogue led in Brussels, because days ago I listened that the special envoy for the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue, Miroslav Lajčák, said that we won't start from the scratch. But then when we check what Kurti has been, and his discourse, what he has been in last 5 years, it's been on reviewing all the agreements that were signed in Brussels. So, you know, this immediately someone, either Lajčák or Kurti, have to step down a bit and, you know, have to compromise some of what they've been saying, even lately. Though lately I checked, before we started this webinar, I checked, double-checked the program of Vetvendosia. They are not in 50 pages. They are not talking of the dialogue with Serbia at all. So dialogue with Serbia is not included. The only time when Serbia is mentioned is 3 times, and it's in reference to a preparation that Vetvendosia seeks to do for suing Serbia for genocide committed in 1998, 1999, but nothing on the dialogue with Serbia, which I think still is a pressing issue, not maybe for Kurti and even other political parties, but I think our international partners will not give to Kurti or to anyone 3 or 4 years to undertake reforms, economic reforms, and other social policies in order to allow them to breathe and to deal only with inner ills that we have in here. So Vetvenosia's program is centered around justice and employment, and also coping with the pandemic, but is not at all centered around the dialogue with Serbia. And it really remains to be seen how, if Vetvendosia will be in the next government. Again, the polls are suggesting that they are leading with a wide margin, but it remains remains to be seen. Then we need to see in the first week to see how will Kurti address that, because we have seen even in the electoral campaign, he was almost wordless on the issue of the dialogue. It's not that Kurti was speaking on how he will go forward with the dialogue and what is Kosovo's position if he is in the will of the government. Also, the other parties, to be honest, have not been talking a lot about the dialogue. Just if we exclude here the LDK, who has been whose main campaign was about hailing the DC agreement. I think one of the only fruits that they can rip these days, and trying to sell it as a silver bullet. Especially the recognition by Israel that was a consequence of the documents that were signed in DC. I might stop here. I have a lot to say. As I said, only in these 12 months, it's been dramatic and traumatic. And in a way, even for us, a journalist, it's very difficult to set a timeline of what really happened. But in a positive note, I would say that despite all these turmoils, I can, with full mouth, say that in this at least 3 lost elections, we've had really fair elections, which I'm hoping to. And if it doesn't sound modest, I apologize, but I think maybe they were actually an exemplary for the whole Western Balkans. If we see for the amount of irregularities or fraud, it's not that we've seen any major fraud. We have had problems, especially on the Serbian community, because we have written a lot at Prishtina Inside about that as well, about the fact that Srpska Lista is very much dominating the political scene of the Serbian community here in Kosovo. But overall, I think we've had really fair election, and I'm hoping that at least on Sunday, despite all these tensions, political tensions that we've had, turmoils, at least we will have a very fair and democratic process. And then aftermath, let's see what mathematics say.
Thank you very much for this timeline overview. And you tackled a lot of challenges that we should talk about. There are also the questions already piling up. I have a lot of questions. So we're going to try to do some quick questions and quick answers to get through all of this. And my first follow-up, of course, would be, you mentioned there is like the 5th election since the independence. There is not a continuity of governance in Kosovo. Donika, would you say it would be better if there is no need for a coalition government, and if Vivendosje wins with an absolute majority, we will see stability?
Well, it depends on what stability means. If that's stability that Vučić brought to Serbia, then we don't want that. Or something similar to what the political system in Albania offers, in which, you know, the winner takes it all, and then, you know, good luck undoing everything that has been happening while one party governs. No, I mean, political instability in Kosovo, it's a result of also the existence of the critical mass and good opposition. And I think this is, you know, if we list all the challenges and also probably the failures we had in the past years, then we should also focus on the positive side. It's because this instability existed because the political and the critical mass existed. The opposition was always in the parliament. It hasn't been boycotted like in Albania and in Montenegro, and also in Serbia as well, in which the opposition did not take part at all. In Albania last year, there were elections without the opposition at all. So this is not what we want. Of course, we would aim for political stability because that allows us to focus on actual reforms and substance. But honestly, having a party sort of taking it all without a coalition is in a system I think in a weak and not so consolidated system such as Kosovo, it can be risky. I mean, it can generate stability, which can be artificial, the stability that sometimes even the EU wants, but that doesn't mean that it will bring and consolidate democracy necessarily. So this is my fear, that if we in Kosovo, with this political system, still manage to have a party taking it all, also managing the three key positions in Kosovo, such as the president, prime minister, and the head of the parliament, then where is the checks and balances? I mean, in a consolidated democracy, in a consolidated system, this might work, but in a captured system such as Kosovo, if this wants to be used for the bad, then it means that we won't be seeing any democratic reforms anytime soon. And this is the biggest fear for a person who knows how authoritarian leaders lead, and who also has been following the trends of authoritarian leaders and systems, not just in the Balkans, but also in the EU. And I mean, this is also what we have been talking every time I express my let's say, skepticism when it comes to this. People say like, oh, let's go there and then we'll see. But then when you will see, it will probably be too late. I mean, just years before, Serbia had the most vibrant civil society in Europe as well. I mean, think tanks from Serbia were listed as top think tanks globally. And now we have a civil society that is captured. I mean, apart from few organizations and the media, you know how the media landscape in Serbia is. If that happens, then I don't think that stability would be something that our citizens would want.
Thank you. Eraldin, following up, when we talk about a possibility that Vetëvendosje will dominate the political landscape and also fill the top positions, we need to talk about the two top positions. Can you give us a quick overview about Kurti and Osmani, especially given the fact that officially he can't run for being a member of parliament, but he can become the prime minister? And how important is the position of president? And how is Osmani going to, if she will become it, how is she going to fill it?
It's correct that the Central Election of Kosovo Commission did not certify Kurti as a candidate for MP, but that will not prevent him from becoming a prime minister. Mm-hmm. So that's just sort of formality that he is not in the list, like in a certified list of Vetëvendosje. At the same time, we have Vjosa Osmani, who is an official candidate of Vetëvendosje, and it's one of the very rare times when political parties, if not the only, when political parties set their candidates also for the president, because on May we will need to have a new president, as the mandate of the current president is coming at the end. So Vetëvendosje has proposed Vjosa Osmani to become a new president. At the same time, we have former Prime Minister Ramush Haradinaj, who is also nominated from his party to become president. So it will be also interesting now. That's why the mathematics are important, because it all depends, these machinations that we will see in the very near future, on the percentage that Vetëvendosje manages to gather in these elections. Because if they can't manage to have the like a landslide victory, then it will mean that they will need another junior coalition. And already there are voices here in Prishtina who see Vetëvendosje quite possibly signing a deal with Ramush Haradinaj's party, the Alliance for the Future of Kosovo, and allowing him to become a new president, and in a way to then lead the country with quite how to say, sustainable majority in Kosovo. Now, Vjosa Osmani was already the acting president of Kosovo, because she used to be the speaker of the assembly. And when Hashim Thaçi, who I'm mentioning for the first time today, had to resign in October because he was summoned by the special chambers, she automatically, as it's accordingly to our constitution, replaced, but that's will last only 6 months because that's what constitution says. You cannot have an acting president more than 6 months in Kosovo. You need to re-elect. So these elections are not only fulfilling the key position, which is the prime minister's seat, but as well as an important position, which at least has proven to be very important in the last 5 years since Thaçi, or 6 years since Thaçi was in charge of it, because Kosovo's president, although looks nominally a formal position, it's not indeed. They have quite some competencies in foreign affairs, as we have seen, and disobedient president can meddle quite much in the affairs of the executive or the government. So I think Kurti has signed a deal with Vjosa Osmani and has nominated her as president. Even in the electoral campaign, he has been introducing her. We've seen him and her playing with this aura of change and introducing her as the next president. But I think it's quite difficult to foresee that there will be possible that Vjosa Osmani will become the next president. Again, it depends from the percentage of Sunday's election, but it's difficult to foresee that Vjosa Osmani can get elected as president, and for one reason, because to get elected as president, you don't need only 61 seats at Kosovo Assembly. Or president, in order to be elected, needs to have at least 80 deputies present at the chamber, and when in second round, he or she can be elected with 61 votes, but political parties can decide not to show up at the assembly and therefore preventing anyone to get elected. So that means that it is quite a difficult position for me or anyone right now to foresee who will become the next president. But I think the chances that Vjosa Osmani will become next president are quite slim, just taking into the account of that Vetëvendosje cannot win at in any scenario 80 seats. So it remains to be seen. It also remains to be seen what will be the percentage of Haramos Haradinaj's party. But what I can say right now is that after the election, if Kurti manages to set up a president who will be loyal to him, and if he becomes in the scenario that he will become prime minister, again, I have to restate this, because we are talking as fait accompli. You know, I don't want to sound like that because we still don't know. It remains to be seen. But if he sets someone who is loyal to him at the presidency, then it means that it will be easier to co-govern, because there's a bunch of laws that need to be decreed by the president. And surely the prime minister in Kosovo is the key position, but again, the president can play a destructive role and can prevent decision or reforms to be undertaken. So I think Kurti is looking forward to strike a deal with anyone and the next president to be his ally. So there's been also some other independent voices that circulated around here in Kosovo that could be nominated by Kurti after the elections if he does not, manage to gather enough votes to elect Osmani or someone else. But that's all speculations, and at this stage I wouldn't want to go forward with it. But I think
the nice thing is that we actually can speculate. I mean, a bad thing would be if we would know how everything turns out.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, to connect with what Donika said, look, for a long time, actually, even in Kosovo, between 2008, I remember 2015, we were complaining a lot about stability, because we had quite too much stability in Kosovo, and Thaçi was running the government in a way, and that stability sometimes was at the cost of other social economic issues in Kosovo. That Thaçi was centered all around the dialogue with Kosovo Serbia, and we all know the results of that dialogue. But since 2015 and on, we also understood that sometimes it's difficult to find this middle position where you lack completely any sort of stability. Because as I said, it's also then difficult to assess who, what did in this country in the last 5 years. Like, it's very difficult to blame. It's just a mess of all political parties co-governing together and creating not only preventing opportunity for economic development, or we have just to remind ourselves that 50% of Kosovo's population is under 25. So, and in the last 5 years, what we all dealt in Kosovo was issues related to the 90s. These youngsters, this chunk of society has either was just born then for the issues that we are dealing now. So that's also somehow explained a support to Mr. Kurti in a way, because his whole campaign was on this issue of social justice, fighting corruption, and so on and so forth. So youngsters especially are looking forward to vote for a government that copes with their own with internal ills, and that's maybe why it reflects that you don't see in the political program of Vetëvendosje the issue of the dialogue with Serbia, because we have seen even other polls by very credible NGOs in Kosovo. The dialogue is not in the top list of the how to say that people worry in Kosovo. It's not the top priority. It's other issues. It's unemployment, which soars at more than 40%. And in the case of youngsters, even goes more than 50%. So, you know, these
Thank
are...
you. Yeah. So, speaking of numbers, and what is important, of course, you need a majority, and you need to be able to form a coalition or then also fill the positions. When we talk about these numbers, and this is also one question from the audience, it will determine by how many are actually going to turn up at the election. And when we see that we have constantly some sort of state of electoral campaign and there is not governing, isn't that tiresome? Are people still going out and wanting to vote? And in connection with this, we are in the middle of a pandemic. It's very crucial that we are socially distancing, but you're having an electoral campaign. People are gathering. Parties are bringing people together. And at the same time, where you would have the possibility to have absentee ballots, where I think there are a really high number of people that registered for it. 175,000 is a number that I found. But is this something that the people will actually also trust in? And is that a possibility for election fraud, Donika?
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking because I saw this question before, and I just went to the website of the Central Election Commission to check, you know, the statistics. And in 2019, we had 1.9 registered, and the number has been lowered because the commission finally cleared the list, so we don't have deceased people. And this is really good because that was one of the sources and used by many political parties, especially back then when the elections weren't as well organized as in 2019. These were used to actually for vote fraud. And the second one is the people voting with unmake outdated documents. So basically this is also in relation to the Serbian community living in Kosovo who are rejecting Kosovo documents. So basically the commission has been taking them out of the list, and they wouldn't be allowed to vote in the elections of February. Back in 2019, the turnout was quite well. I think, I mean, if this is correct, then which is a formal and official is 44.5% of the people actually went out and voted. And in spite of the circumstances now, I see this number probably staying the same. It's not going to be challenged because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's because we already had elections in 2 municipalities in which basically the process went quite well. The second is that, you know, no one is following the anti-COVID-19 measures. I mean, if you look at how Kosovo is functioning today, we are fully open. I have been asked by many friends from Europe, why are you going to restaurants and why the restaurants are still open and we are kind of functioning normal, just normally just taking out the curfew, which is from 9:30 I think at this point till 5 in the morning. So I don't see that kind of preventing people from going out, and I see potential increase because people are, in spite of the fact that we go to the voting stations every 2 years, this time is going to be different because we have been accumulating dissatisfaction since March 2020. Overthrowing a government in the middle of the pandemic is not a good idea, full stop. And the polarization in the parliament and everything that took place afterwards and the trauma that the citizens have been experiencing, and not just in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic, is the way that the society has been deeply polarized. I haven't really seen a country in which people protest to keep a government in place. I mean, usually protests are against the government, and in Kosovo we were protesting with pans from the balconies and from the windows, trying to send a message that we want you to stay together so we can get through this pandemic together. And this did not happen. I still recall the assembly session, which basically overthrew Kurti government. It was very ugly to see. And I'm not just talking about the old ruling elite, I'm even talking about the polarization between the two coalition partners who were considered a government of hope. They were like blackmailing each other, and they were spreading so much hate that at some point it was unbearable to see it happening. And then the Houthi government and the way that the situation has been managed, the way that we are economically devastated, and the parliament wasn't capable of going through with a simple law on economic recovery. We just had and the one that was, even adopted, it was already too late, that it wasn't a recovery anymore. It was just some sort of assistance to keep them ongoing. So all of this has been accumulated. The DC agreement, the stress around it, which, in which we really were up in the air thinking what's going to be out of that agreement. Speculations have taken, the ground. I mean, we were all talking about potential exchange of territories, or even, Kosovo being divided, or like it was a lot of stress around it, a lot of arrogance from the political elite in Kosovo. Saatchi and the rest ended up in the special court that has been, of course, gone through our parliament, adopted in our parliament, because we just sign agreements or go through with anything that's out there, and we don't really read them, and this was the problem with the special court, because after it was established by our parliament, the same people who established it wanted to dissolve it. So just imagine how hard it is for the citizens to actually follow up on all of that. So judging by all this accumulation and dissatisfaction with the current political elite, but also wanting to see political stability and hoping for that, I do believe that the turnout will either remain the same, but also might increase, because if you look at the diaspora vote this time has been skyrocketing. And the Central Election Commission, there is another question which was asked, and which probably will talk about it, but in spite of the complexities, they still voted. They paid hundreds of euros through DHL, because they even created a very short time span, knowing that the post offices are not working normally. Now people are sending through DHL or even more expensive post offices, and they are, a lot of them are even coming to Kosovo in the middle of the pandemic. There are buses coming with people from diaspora, which will increase potentially the number of voters. We're not still sure about the votes from Serbia. OSCE is not going to oversee any elections because we are mature and wise enough. We know how to organize elections. I mean, this was also what they said. It's procedurally, we know how to organize elections. Eraldin mentioned the fact that we have been sort of praised for the 2019 elections by the all monitoring international mechanisms during the elections. And we still don't know how the post offices and vote by post will look like from Serbia, because we have been focusing on diaspora living mainly in the EU and abroad. So if you look at all this, you know, sort of citizens' will and engagement, and really this desire to probably see change and stability to some extent, you know, they will definitely, against all odds, will vote, and they are looking forward to it.
Thank you. Well, speaking about governmental coup and contesting absentee ballots, there is a question by Erhard Busek. What can we expect from the Biden government in relationship to the developments in Kosovo? And as you mentioned, Eraldin, there is not much in the party program about the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue. Is this something that the Biden administration will actually bring to the table, foster, or can we expect something else?
Well, what is expected to happen, if we refer to the letter that President Biden sent to Alexander Vučić, Serbia's president, days ago, it's very clear that he was actually urging Serbia to have a mutual recognition. But what is actually important for me in my reading is that he also mentioned the Serbia's accession towards the European Union, which also could mean that the whole dialogue now will be transferred with a support by the United States to the European level. I mean, it remains to be seen, but I'm not sure that President Biden will continue to mediate as Trump did, to try to sign the documents and deals that most of them, I don't know how they will be implemented. We have all doubts. Like we've seen this issue with Israel that was implemented, so we cannot call it completely a hollow documents that were signed in DC on September 4th, but there's numerous agreements within it where in which also Kurti criticized and said that all these documents need to be reviewed. Actually, in a debate that we organized with Vetvendossia's Bern, we were asking about it, and I think the answers that we get is simply that we need to review all the agreements that breach Kosovo's sovereignty, and it's still a very wide and hollow answer because it's not specific. Because at the past, for instance, I interviewed Mr. Kurti 2 months ago, and he was basically saying that that agreement is null, like is nothing. It's basically a piece of empty paper. But then we've seen also that that agreement, we agree or not with it, also brought a recognition, which again, there's a lot of discussion in here because Kosovo decided to go not aligned with the EU policies on issue of Jerusalem being the capital city of Israel, as you know, because Kosovo now is establishing an embassy, has pledged to establish an embassy in Jerusalem. So I think from Kosovo's side, I think it's more relaxed to have Biden as president, because at least he's very much predictable. What we felt in the Trump's administration, I may be being very explicit, but it was obscurity, it was uncertainty, it was like you couldn't simply project what could happen next, from being a Middle East country to issues that, you know, that were like proposals of naming lakes in Kosovo in Trump's name. Like, these are not that much harming. Maybe I'm being too ironic here, but these are not harming per se for Kosovo's sovereignty. But to be very honest, it was a very stressing time seeing that there were people who did not know much on the legacy and things that have happened in the Western Balkans. And now it's a bit of relief, but that doesn't mean that everything got solved, because I think it's really important what will be Kosovo's position, because we should not forget that when Biden was vice president, the US was supporting deals such as the Association for Serbian Majority Municipalities, which was even ruled unconstitutional by our constitutional court in 2016. So we need to see that what will be the American position now, because obviously they asked for mutual recognition in the letter. It's very explicit, but at what cost? Like, that's very important. Like, what is the US exactly, like what's the compromise that needs to go? And this is interesting time, because Kurti has said that our biggest compromise was actually the Ahtisaari package, which was the foundation of Kosovo state. And just yesterday, Vetëvendosja, in Kosovo, there were the anniversary of the killing of 2 activists in 2007. And the protest of Vetëvendosja back then, a social movement, was against Ahtisaari package, basically, that founded later the state of Kosovo. And now it really remains to be seen how Kurti will proceed. Like, will he simply decide, as he did with the Trump administration, to say that no, I won't seal a deal which will breach Kosovo's sovereignty, or whether he will simply start compromising and entering in an era where we would see a person who always spoke against compromising himself. That's a very important time. And again, I think even in the Brussels dialogue is very important, because as I mentioned, Lajčák said that nothing will start from the scratch. I'm paraphrasing, because he might not have said nothing, but he said the Brussels dialogue will not start from the scratch, meaning that there's a legacy in there. And this legacy was disputed by Kurti continually. So I'm very much interested to see what will be Kurti's approach, because Kurti's approach was, we need to set preconditions in order to go in Brussels. And the preconditions were, I can at least foresee that are quite unacceptable for Serbia. Apology for the war crimes, the missing persons, financial claims from Serbia, and so on and so forth. So they are all related to the bloody past. And we have seen that Aleksandar Vučić at all is not interested to talk about these topics, or to have an acknowledgement of the crimes that were committed by Serbia in the 90s. So it is a very interesting time, and it remains to be seen what approach will Kurti have in his hand. But we should also not forget that Kurti himself has been directly supporting Biden's candidacy, which was, even in Kosovo, was considered as a risk, because if Trump would have been re-elected, that could cause him trouble if he would be elected as prime minister. So he took all sort of risk. So now he's probably thinking that he has a friend in DC finally, but it actually is very unpredictable what exactly will happen, but it's more predictable that it would be with Trump administration for sure.
Thank you, Eraldin. Yeah, so let's go a bit deeper into the questions from the audience. Raise your hand if you want to actually talk to our 2 panelists. But in the meantime, I'm going to ask a question that was posed by Selmin Zakiri. For which party coalition is the exchange of ethnically homogeneous regions between Serbia and Kosovo still a negotiating topic after the election? And is there a threat that negotiations with Belgrade will stagnate with a government that is led by Vetëvendosje? Donika?
Well, I mean, I will start from the latter. Of course, the dialogue is going to be one of the first challenges for any government, not the upcoming government. And this is the mistake that Kurdi made in 2019. He was pretending that the dialogue does not exist and that Serbia is not an issue for him and for his government. Focusing on internal issues, in his first interview as prime minister, he said, like, whether I'm recognized by Serbia or not is not an issue, it's not a problem for me. Well, it is. And we have to talk about it. Talking about it before the elections is essential. He didn't do it in 2019, and they didn't do it when they negotiated with LDK. So if you look at the program, there was only one paragraph in relation to Kosovo and Serbia, which was super general, didn't provide anything but we should be unified and we are against territorial exchange, which we all know. I mean, apart from Fashi, who was more vocal and on and off supporting this idea, there was no explicit endorsement in Kosovo by the other political leaders in relation to this potential alternative as a solution between Kosovo and Serbia. Now he's doing the same, and he's doing the same because he knows that he's going to win the elections, and the issue of Serbia is going to challenge his winning position. Because if we talk about Serbia, he's for sure going to be challenged, and I'm sure that they don't have a plan on how to continue. They know what they don't want. Similarly to many in Kosovo, we don't know what we want, and we don't offer a third alternative. We know that we don't want the association of Serbian municipalities that might lead to executive powers and probably the scenario at least of Republika Srpska, which was heralded here in Kosovo, although there are many differences in which make this comparison fundamentally wrong. And there is the other one of territorial exchange, which was, rightly opposed by many of us in Serbia and Kosovo, but also in the level of the EU. But we don't know what's the third option that we want. I mean, if we sit and negotiate, you will have to know your initial position and then negotiate it. We know that we want recognition from Serbia, but how do we get there? And this is one of the issues that we haven't talked in Kosovo, and this is going to be the first challenge that Kurti is going to deal with. I mean, of course, we know that the internal reforms are important, but it was the dialogue with Serbia that kind of halted all the internal reforms because of the stabilitocracy cycle in which Tashi put the country in. And we don't want to see that scenario again. We don't have that much of a time. Also seeing that Biden is coming to power and the letter that he sent to Serbia is going to be sent to Kosovo for sure. And this means that there is a lot of enthusiasm, political will from our partners, strategic partners, to move on with this process. So I think that Kurti should be challenged, but also we should demand that he tells us what he's going to do. I mean, the last statement, he said, I mean, one of his close persons said that, oh, I will come to power, and when I have the legitimacy and the power, then I'll let you know what I'm planning to do. And this would be already too late. So this is really important, and he's going to be challenged, and he and his party should know what they want out of this process. The second one is that opposing everything that has happened in the past decade is wrong. And this is not the starting point that we want to see. Of course, there were a lot of shortcomings, but there were a lot of successes, and there were a lot of agreements that at least, it took them a long time, but they brought progress. So the starting point being, I will review everything. Well, you're not going to review everything. I mean, probably it's going to be reviewed if, the final agreement is going to be an agreement sort of gathering all elements that have been negotiated so far. Then in that case, there is room for negotiations. But pretending that you're going to start from the scratch is not the right approach. Second one, I mean, when you are a consolidated and serious state, you don't start processes all over when the government changes, and this is the approach that Vedvendosje has been using as a starting point. That everything that has happened in the past 20 years is bad, and then we are going to do it right. So these processes are something that as a process cannot happen because it's simply impossible. What also they are not calculating rightly is that, I mean, we have criticized DDC agreement a lot, but it has been endorsed by Biden. And it doesn't mean that when Biden comes to power, it will just, go back, just like Kurti say, like, oh, let's, revisit everything. It was convenient for Biden because it was an agreement that sort of gave them access to Serbia, something that, given the fact that geopolitics in the Balkans is changing, and now we have Russia and we have even China being present in Serbia for the US is something good, and having the office there, that an investment office for the entire Southeast Europe is okay, and not being enemies but actually being friendly nations, it's okay. So this agreement has been endorsed by Biden, and it has they started implementing it, and what we can do at this point is just deconstruct the elements and see what are the ones that are beneficiary for us, and those that we can use. And in this case, for instance, the economic cooperation is perfect, and it's something that falls under the agenda of the EU, which is something that we can use and merge in a way. What I'm expecting from Biden is that he will have a different approach towards the EU and some member states. And member states, I mean Germany, because Germany has been the one kind of leading the no territorial exchange front. So in this case, it's something that I'm expecting to see a more coordinated approach towards Western Balkans, which I consider to be a positive window of opportunity. For Vučić, dragging feet is okay. We cannot offer that. We shouldn't offer that. For Vučić, it's convenient to remain in power and keep Kosovo issue, because that's how he uses the leverage as a leverage internationally. For us, we cannot offer that because we have been considered as a destructive party by constantly disrupting the process with our internal issues. Then we should just make a position aligned with our strategic partner and dialogue based on values and principles, which were the foundation back in 2011 when the dialogue was initiated.
Thank you. Eraldin, you wanted to add? Yeah, very briefly, and then we have 10 minutes of rapid questions and answers before we do a final statement.
All right.
And wrap the whole thing up.
I saw the letter of Biden, and well, I don't know whether I can call it endorsement, as Donika is saying. I'm not saying that Biden, such as for a case, for instance, for Iran, where he was completely against Trump policies or other issues. In terms of Kosovo, I think to say an endorsement maybe is too much, but he definitely did not say that I'm not.
On Twitter, when the agreement was signed, not the letter specifically sent to Vučić.
No, but that's okay. What I just need to explain this. So what I think why I think it will not be endorsed is because I think Biden knows quite well, Biden administration know quite well that Kosovo issue or dispute with Serbia is not an economic normalization issue. He's been in the 90s here. He knows that the whole issue is political. He knows what have happened in the 90s. And it's not that the issues with aviation is the issue between Kosovo and Serbia. Flights from Belgrade to Prishtina are not the biggest stumble for the progress in the future. Let's be honest. So that's the issue why I think that
the agreement signed with DC, that's another endorsement letter. The agreement itself has elements that can be implemented, not necessarily bringing recognition, but we can build on that.
I'm not saying, I myself said that some of the elements, such as the recognition from Israel, derives from the documents that were signed. I'm not saying that these agreements or whatever we call documents will not be are completely nullified, as Kurti said. I'm just saying that I see it quite difficult that Biden will take it as a reference in the future and will organize another economical normalization deal and so on and so forth. I think that he will completely either be aligned with the EU or organize something that is fully political and not organize meetings where economic normalization between Kosovo and Serbia is introduced as the as the main issue of the dispute or the genesis of Kosovo-Serbia dispute, because that's not the case, as we all, I believe even you agree, Donika. We wrote about this a lot, and I think
that we can build on that, but that shouldn't be used as a reference for the final deal. I mean, that's another process. Mutually agreed, even by Grenell, that the political issues would be left to Brussels, but this is something that they wanted to push forward. And
don't forget that Trump's administration said that there will be another basically deal. This was the first economic one, and then they warned that in the future we might have something else, basically, because they were aware. It's very clear.
As a political process.
And we also have seen that in Trump's administration there was definitely a division between the Washington and Brussels on the issue of Kosovo, and it's very clear. You can see what Borrell is saying and what Lajčák is saying. Basically, even Lajčák a few weeks ago said that the agreement in Brussels means almost nothing. He said something like in this line. So, you know, there was a clear line of division, and I expect that now there's a time of healing between Washington and Brussels in the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue. I mean, I can imagine that there will be a overall healing of DC and Brussels relations, but I'm speaking specifically about Kosovo.
Okay, fantastic to see that even between the two experts we have here, there's already a lot of discussion going on. I can only imagine how that would look in a room where representatives from the US, from the EU, Serbia and Kosovo are present. Anyway, now I'm going to paraphrase some of the questions that are still open from our audience, and I want a rapid answer from both of you. All right. Okay. So we have one from Robin Goze-Johan, who asks more or less, is there a, if we ignore the political spectrum, it doesn't matter left or right, is there a credible, constructive and legitimate party alternative?
Donika, go first.
Well, okay. I don't know. In Kosovo, no one cares about ideology. No one cares about programs. If you look at how citizens think about these elections, they just want to see the ruling elite out of the government and out of the key positions, and they want change. They want new people who are seen as credible reformists.
Right. So yes or no?
So there is, honestly, I mean, if that would be Vedvendosje. Honestly, I mean, I don't know, because I have my reservations even towards that political party. So Vedvendosje is
no apathy.
Alternative.
No alternative, and there isn't even an alternative.
No, the current alternative for the citizens is Vedvendosje. Outside of that, I don't see any party thriving, because at this point we are kind
very
of
well. Okay.
divided between the old ruling elite and the new ones who will push the country forward.
Quick, please. Eraldin, yes or no? Is there an alternative?
I think there should be an alternative. I think even after this election, there will be alternatives towards Vedvendosje if they win in elections. Even if it's not in the current political spectrum, there will be something born of it. And that's maybe perhaps in positive side, the most positive thing, because something else can be born. Because in the last decade, the only opposition in Kosovo was Vedvendosje, and it somehow monopolized the opposition voice. So we need always to have a strong opposition as we had in the last 10 years.
Perfect, thank you. Ferenc Neme from our lovely colleagues from the Institute for Foreign Affairs and Trade in Budapest is asking if the attitude towards the Kosovo specialist chambers and SBO would change with the new LVV government. Donika, yes or no?
No, it's a process that is irreversible. So any attempt politically to dissolve this would be detrimental for Kosovo.
Eraldin?
I don't think so. I don't think even Kurti 2 months ago said this to me in an interview, that his only issue is to basically aid those indictees with the state funds. That's all what he wants. But I think he's quite clear on that. It's not that there will be any attempt to dissolve or to enter another to do any move that would be completely almost impossible at this stage. So no.
Very well, thank you. Balin Top asks, if we talk about strengthening regional cooperation, do you think the Western Balkan 6 initiative could be a useful tool for the next Kosovo government in the Euro-Atlantic integration process? This time, Eraldin first, yes or no? Or Donika also fine.
Okay, go Donika first.
I mean, I'm opting for we are a region, whether inside or outside of the EU, we cannot physically avoid each other. So yeah, Western Balkans can help, and if it pairs with V4, because they've been cooperating and they've been formed based on the V4 structure, then why not? It provides local ownership because the countries in the region actually contribute with their own budgets. The MFAs cooperate. I'm part of it. I'm part of many activities that they organize. I also believe in RICO and in other regional mechanisms which would push countries forward in terms of cooperation. So yes.
Okay. I'm more skeptical in this issue, and my skepticism only lays on the fact how the political situation is in the Western Balkans. And to give you just a short example, is that within the deal of DC, it's also foreseen to be established, or what was this about the regional cooperation? There's an agreement which foresees that all Kosovo and Serbia will be part of a regional cooperation, and that was one of very much disputed issues in Kosovo. Maybe Donika can remind me the name.
Schengen.
Sorry?
That's mini Schengen, but it's different from Western Balkan 6 initiative and other initiatives that have been.
I know. I just took as an example.
From Vucic, Zaev, and Rama, which is completely detached from what the EU has been doing, but it has the elements that CEFTA and regional economic area have already talked about.
Yeah, I promise to be short, but these are really issues that take longer. I just took as an example to say that it's slightly difficult to foresee that the Western Balkan 6 model could work these days, especially with these tensions that we have politically. But, you know, anything can happen if there will be progress and reforms, especially in the neighborly relations. And if Kosovo-Serbia relations will have an, serious improvement, maybe that can happen.
But opting out is not an option.
Wonderful. You will have the chance to do a last 2-minute statement after this very last rapid answer question that I have for you. Al Busing and I are currently writing some stories that probably will become a book where we argue that the Western Balkan countries should join the EU immediately. So, and then, we'll sort this out later. Join the European Union immediately, yes or no?
Oh, we're doing that with BIEPAC as well. We are opposing the economic model, which was extend, cooperation economically, but don't include them politically. This was, a scenario that was introduced. No, I mean, not immediately. We need to deliver on the reforms. We really have to set the country straight before we enter the EU. But I do think that a new approach should be used by the EU. The new methodology has not been, implemented, not even in case of Serbia and Montenegro, and we don't know whether it's going to work or not. But we really need another political will and push by the EU in order to keep the EU agenda ongoing in the Balkans. So yes, I mean, that's the only alternative, and this is how I want to see the future of the Balkans.
Okay, Eraldin, joining immediately or step by step, one after the other?
Altogether, yes, altogether. Sorry, this was okay. Yeah, that would be no veto, no Bulgaria, no Greece, no. I don't want to think about it.
I think that reforms need to take place, first of all, before we join. I mean, what would change if we would join the EU at this stage where we are? But what is more even important is a clear European as well stance on this, because we've seen that the EU is very divided on the enlargement. So the worst scenario is just to see how the EU is constantly divided about the future of Western Balkans joining the EU. So step by
Thank you
step.
very much. So here comes my very last question. Please try to be as thorough, but also as concise as possible, because basically we have 1 minute left.
Okay.
1 year from now.
1 year, okay.
1 year from now, are we going to meet again because we have to talk about another election, or are we going to see a stable government? What is the situation going to look like concerning fighting corruption, economic recovery, and the pandemic? Donika, go.
Oh, I mean, if we don't meet in September, then we don't meet 1 year after, because that means that we will have the president and we are not going to have new elections anytime soon. I'm hoping that stability will also provide us the venue to talk about a substance, about reforms, and I hope next year, this time, we'll meet and talk about the progress and shaping the country and the region forward.
Next year, let's hope that we'll talk about more of.
No
pandemic. First of all, let's hope that we won't talk about a pandemic, but we'll talk about. Especially for me, it's important to talk about how the next government, whoever will be there, is fixing the internal ills that Kosovo people are facing. I think that's more important than anything, at least to me. Then the others will be all there. Relations with Serbia, I expect, will be in the next 10 years. Even as you can see, Serbia has issues with Bosnia and Croatia still, that they recognize each other. So I'm not expecting that after a year everything will be solved. But as I said, for me, a top priority will be economic development and social issues. And that it would be very lovely to discuss with all of you in the next year, hopefully.
And in person.
Yeah, please.
And in person, definitely.
I don't know if I know how to navigate this real conversations with real people in front of me.
Donika, Eraldin, it was a pleasure. Sorry that I pressured you in the end, but I think it became very dynamic. Let's hope that the situation on Sunday will also be very dynamic. We're looking forward to read your take on this, Eraldin, as you're certainly reporting it for Prishtina Inside. Donika, we are looking forward to send around the briefing that you prepared. Thank you very much to our partners, the Politische Akademie and the Karl-Renner-Institute, for always making this possible. And of course, to everyone who participated for the interesting questions. Thank you very much. This was Parliamentary Elections in Kosovo, a series organized by the Institute for the Danube region and Central Europe, together with the Political Academy and the Karl-Renner-Institute. Stay safe, stay healthy, and wear a mask.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you very much for having us. All the best. Also, thank you for the attention. Bye-bye.